Hello, everyone, and welcome to Impact 100 Philadelphia's Grant Application Information Session. My name is Alice Hausman. I co-chair the Nonprofit Liaison Committee. Our goal for today is to provide you with a clear picture of who we are, what we fund, our process, and important dates. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available on Impact 100's website for later viewing. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First is Denise Rainier, who is going to explain the financial requirements of the proposal. Beverly Schwartz, who is the grants co-chair, who will give you details about the focus area, grant process, timetables, and steps for applying. Very privileged to have Carol Austin with us today, who's an executive director of First Up, who was a recipient of one of our grants in previous years. And then Denise Horan, who is my co-chair for the Nonprofit Liaison, will direct questions and answers. Please enter your questions in the Q&A section at any time during the program. If you want, you can indicate which of our speakers you want to address the question to. We'll address all of the questions at the end of the presentations. Our mission is to engage women in philanthropy and collectively fund high-impact grants that address unmet needs in the Philadelphia region and raise the profile of smaller nonprofit organizations. Through this work, our goal is to make our community more just, equitable, and healthy for everyone. Our model of collective giving is very simple, but we believe very powerful, and benefits both our members and the nonprofit community. By pooling contributions, members leverage their donations to make large, high-impact grants of $100,000 to smaller nonprofits in our funding area. As you'll hear more about in a bit, member-run committees review the letters of interest, grant applications, perform the site visits, and select finalists. The goal is to see a ripple effect to this kind of grant making. We hope that through the process of applying to Impact 100, nonprofits can tell their story to a wider audience, raise awareness, gain recognition, and secure additional funding. This is a snapshot of our membership history. Since our founding year in 2008-2009, Impact 100 Philadelphia has awarded grants totaling over $4 million to 60 local nonprofits, including 31 high-impact $100,000 grants. Depending on our total funding, we also award smaller operating grants. We're currently in our membership cycle, so we won't know the total funding available until the end of November or early December. But it's important to remember that all applicants always apply for $100,000. This is who we funded last year. In this past year, we initiated a community awards program giving money to 3 small organizations working in areas selected by our membership. There's no proposal for these awards. Candidate organizations were solicited and researched by our membership. We'll continue this again this year, but again, there's no application. So the only application is for our high impact grants. I'm going to spend the next few minutes helping you to understand our grant, what we value and support. Let's start with what Impact 100 grants will pay for. We'll pay for programs or services, administration, including staff salaries, infrastructure such as building or facilities improvement. Proposals should explain what the core mission of the organization is and who benefits from its services, how the grant will strengthen the organization and its core mission, how effectively the organization executes its mission and serves its constituents. We're less interested in specific expenditures and more about the why. The key thing that your proposal needs to explain is why now? Why will our $100,000 grant propel you forward at this time? Our teams may be reviewing upwards of 25 proposals, so one of the things that differentiates a proposal is the why now. What is happening now that additional funding of $100,000 will make a difference with the groups you are serving? Impact 100 will not fund debt reduction or operating deficits, interim or bridge funding, or endowment funding. We don't fund individuals or private foundations. We won't fund activities that are religious or political in nature. We will fund religious organizations, but not religious activities. Fund drives, annual appeals, fundraising events, or general capital campaigns are also things we will not fund. I'll now turn the slides over to Denise Rainier, the co-chair of the Financial Review Panel.
Thank you, Alice. Impact 100 would like to avoid any surprises for you as an applicant. So this year, we're going to ask at the letter of interest stage if you're prepared to deliver the financial information that's expected at the full application stage. You'll not have to deliver all the financial information at the letter of interest stage. Rather, we're asking if you're prepared to deliver it if needed. The question will allow each applicant to understand at the outset the full scope of what will be requested of those who proceed. So let's talk about the eligibility criteria. At the letter of interest stage, we will ask you to attest that you meet all of the eligibility criteria to qualify. Those criteria listed here include a 501c3 status, a physical base of operation in and serving the residents of the 5-county Philadelphia region, financial statements for the most recent 3 years of operation, a bank account in the local organization name, and you cannot have received an Impact 100 Philadelphia Core Mission grant in the last 3 grant cycles. For those who qualify and are asked to submit a full proposal, we will request that the following financial information be provided with that application. First, we require an income statement and balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. If your audited income statement and balance sheet isn't yet available or is more than 12 months old, we will accept an internally completed one for that most recently completed year. But it must include both the income statement and the balance sheet. The second is a year-to-date interim statement for the current fiscal year. Then third, we look for independently prepared financial statements, either audited or reviewed, for the past 3 full years. A partial year does not qualify. Statements that are compiled but not audited or independently reviewed similarly do not qualify. And fourth, the IRS 990s for the past 2 years. If the most recent year-end 990s are available on the IRS website, we can pull those down. But if not, we request that those copies be appended to the application. So we want to comment on some special circumstances that occur, such as one of them that comes up frequently is an affiliation with the national organization. If you are affiliated with the national organization, we'll be looking for evidence of how you manage funds locally, including things like local revenues, expenses, and cash on hand. We will expect an income statement and balance sheet for those local operations. Now I will hand it off to Beverly Schwartz, the grant's co-chair, who will share with you some of the funding preferences that accompany these requirements.
Thank you, Denise. Good evening or afternoon. I'm delighted to speak to you today about the grants process. Impact 100 applications are reviewed within one of 5 focus areas. They reflect the services you provide. As you best understand your organization and its mission, when you apply for a grant, you choose the focus area in which you want to be considered. We define these focus areas as follows: arts and culture, which includes cultural programs, participation in the arts, arts education. Education, which provides educational opportunities for children or adults. Environment, which improves, preserves, revitalizes or raises awareness of public spaces, facilities, or natural resources. Family, strengthening and enhancing the lives of children and families, including seniors. And health and wellness, which improves the mental health and/or physical well-being of community members. In addition to the eligibility criteria described a few minutes ago, we also have funding priorities. These are not requirements. Organizations that don't meet all of these criteria are still eligible to receive funding, but each of these items should be considered a plus in favor of the applicant. Our members refer to this list throughout the process as they evaluate the LOIs, the full proposals, and they consider all the information they get when they go on site visits. First, we believe our funding sweet spot is an organization with an annual budget between $500,000 and $5 million. Generally, organizations of this size that are properly managed are well positioned to handle a grant of $100,000, but they're small enough that $100,000 can make a meaningful difference to the organization. We look to fund organizations that have programs or services that target underserved populations. Applicants have the opportunity in our LOI and full proposal applications to describe to us the recipients of the services that they have and how they're underserved. And our goal is for grants to help address unmet needs in the region and have a high impact on beneficiaries or communities being served by our grant applicants. That's why we ask you, why now? Why will our grant from us be particularly significant now? To your organization, to your beneficiaries, and to the communities you serve. Last year, we added a preference for organizations that are led by a staff and board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve. To go along with that, we added questions to our LOI and full proposal requesting demographic information for the board and leadership. Because we recognize that developing a diverse executive team may be a work in progress, we invite you to describe the steps your organization is taking to move in the direction of having a more representative leadership team. If you would like to apply for an impact grant, our website will serve as a very important resource for you. The Apply for a Grant tab includes our eligibility criteria, a description of our application process, the important dates in our process, and a list of frequently asked questions. Most, if not all, of the information that we're sharing with you today is also available there. You'll also be able to find links to our letter of inquiry and later in the process, our full proposal on Slide Room. We've made some important changes to the proposal format this year. In an effort to be less burdensome on our applicants, we've streamlined the application and increased the character limit. We also have modified our financial review requirements, as we've said earlier, and are allowing applicants to use their standard documents. Also, at the beginning of your LOI, you'll find all the financial requirements that we will be asking you to submit if you are asked to submit a full proposal. Please review this carefully so you're able to provide everything we need later in the process and it's not a surprise. Here's an overview of how applicants move through our proposal review process. Nonprofits begin by submitting an LOI to one of our 5 focus areas. Impact committees review all of the LOIs and invite select nonprofits to submit a full proposal. These full proposals are reviewed by additional impact committees who determine which applicants will be asked for a site visit, and one finalist will ultimately be selected for each focus area. Please keep in mind, every year there's a different group of members who will evaluate your application, a different group of women in the room. These members may know nothing about your organization, its mission, or its effectiveness in reaching the community it hopes to serve. Your application provides you with an opportunity to highlight what is important to you about the services you provide and how well you're accomplishing your goals. In addition, it's important you clearly identify why this grant will transform your organization's ability to meet the needs of the community you serve. Our grants calendar has not changed much over the last several years. Although our site visits were virtual last year, it's our hope that COVID constraints will not prevent us from having in-person site visits this year. If your organization is selected for a site visit, someone from the team conducting the site visit will reach out to you with all of the information you need to prepare. While we recognize the time and effort and energy you must spend to prepare for a site visit, our goal is to give you an opportunity to provide our members with a more complete picture of your organization and the work that you do. Here are key dates for the 2022 grant cycle. The dates that are highlighted in red are the most important from the perspective of our applicants. Our online letter of inquiry application opens tonight, November 1st, and we will be accepting letters of inquiry until December 8th. In early December, we will be announcing our funding total. That amount will determine the number of grants and the size of the grants we will be awarding in June. In the last several years, our grant pool has been large enough to allow us to provide grants to all 5 of our focus area finalists. On January 14th, we will notify all applicants who submitted an LOI, whether they will be invited to submit a full proposal. Typically, we invite around 15 organizations per focus area committee to submit a full proposal, although there's no strict limit or quota. You will have until February 4th to submit a full proposal. We conduct site visits from March 7th through April 8th. As I noted before, our hope is that our site visits will be in person this year. In mid-May, we will notify our focus area finalists, and at our annual meeting on June 6th, we will award our grants. For questions regarding the application process, please use nonprofitliaison@impact100philly.org. Make sure it's in your address book and it doesn't go straight to spam. In addition, it would be helpful for you to add the grants email, which is grants@impact100philly.org, for notifications, because all applicants will receive notifications from the grants committee at every stage of the process. These stages include the invitation to submit a full proposal, the request for a site visit, and your selection as a finalist. It's critical that you deliberately choose the email address that you put on your application. That's the email address we will use to communicate with you. If the person who submitted your application is no longer working for you, or if the email address on your application has changed, you will not receive our emails regarding these stages in the process. That's important because our process has a very tight timeline and we'll be asking for your prompt response. Please note you might be contacted by someone from the financial review panel or by a focus area committee chair for extra information. They may use their individual email address, and we try very hard to flag these emails as important in the subject header. However, it's easy to miss these emails, so you have to sort of keep your eyes open. We will always follow up if we don't receive a response from you in a few days. Now, it is truly my honor to introduce Carol Austin, the Executive Director of First Up, a 2020 grant awardee.
Great, thank you so much, Beverly, and thank you so much, Impact 100. So I'm here to give you a sense from a grantee's perspective of the process, related to the process. And but before I do that, I first want to say a little bit about First Up so that you have a sense of who we are. So next slide. Okay, so great. So First Up, we are an organization, we've been in existence in southeastern Pennsylvania for the last 50 years. And for 50 years, we were previously affiliated with the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And in that capacity, have really worked to ensure that children in southeastern Pennsylvania have access to the highest quality early learning experiences that they can have. High quality training and teaching in early childhood, because of what we know about how the brain develops, and those first 5 years are the most critical years in a child's life. So to fulfill on that mission, We work with teachers and staff in childcare programs and in pre-K programs to ensure that they're trained and developed in their curriculum and instruction, and in creating the right environments and interactions for young people, for children. Okay, that would enable them to be successful and to successfully be able to transition, into their next step, whether that be into pre-K or into kindergarten. And so we go into programs and we coach teachers. We offer professional development and training, and also college coursework. We also work inside of those programs directly to raise the quality of those programs, because in Pennsylvania we have a quality rating and improvement system. So their standards that they are to meet to be deemed high quality, which is a star 3 or 4 program. And we work with these programs to ensure that they can reach those standards of quality, or NACE accreditation, as well as family child care accreditation. And last, we work to ensure that there's actually a system in place that will allow for programs to be high quality, that there's sufficient funding, that the right policies are in place. So we do advocacy and public policy work to that end as well. All inside of our mission, as I said, to ensure that we provide all the children in southeastern Pennsylvania with the highest quality early learning. Okay, so that's a bit about us and who we are and what we do. And I want to say about working with Impact 100 and going through this process, there are a couple of things that I want to highlight that I've really appreciated through this. One is the personal touch. And when you are as a grantee, or even in going through this process, what I found last year is that there's always someone there who's responsive. Right away, you have a contact person that you're in communication with, who's there to steer you through the process. And then I think a highlight for us was being able to have a site visit. There's one thing being able to share about your organization and the work and the passion that we as nonprofits have for what we do. Is one thing to be able to share about that in writing, but then to be able to have the opportunity to actually speak with people about it and have it really come alive for them, so that you really get the experience that they get you. And there's nothing like being able, I say, to have that opportunity. Now we were scheduled for an in-person site visit, but then there was COVID. So last year we did that virtually, and it was just really a fantastic opportunity. And I will say that after we were awarded the grant, we then had another point person who was our guide. For the entire year, we did a verbal report. We just really be able to connect back into the organization. And then the second thing I want to say is that opportunity to really be highlighted, similar to what I'm doing now. As a grantee, being able to share about First Up, being able to have those opportunities to be featured in the newsletter, being able to have other speaking opportunities to share some more about the work that we do, and to elevate the visibility of our organization. So I would say those two major areas have really been phenomenal, and had this be an incredible experience in which to engage, both obviously from the funding perspective, and then the relationship and the visibility perspective as well. So thank you. So I know that now we're moving in, I believe, to question and answer. So I want to turn things over to Denise.
Thank you, Carol. We've enjoyed working with you as well, you and your team. We would now like to open for questions. Please feel free to direct your questions to anyone on the panel. Simply include their name in the chat box. Otherwise, I will work with each presenter to answer your question. The first group of questions is around our geographic area. We will fund nonprofits in the 5-county area of Philadelphia, so Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Philadelphia counties. The nonprofits can be in any of those, and or all. It doesn't matter. Let's see, there was another one with that. We do not do Jersey. Someone asked about New Jersey, and we do not fund any in New Jersey. There's now an Impact 100 there, so please look online and you have another option there. Back 1 minute, please. Denise, I have a few for you. Is a financial sponsor the same as a fiscal sponsor?
I assume that we're using the same terminology. The idea is, what is your the makeup of your funding? And so you can define for us what that looks like, and then we will review your materials accordingly. But the idea is that we want to make sure that we're seeing the financials that correspond to the services that you're providing.
Thank you. And the next few are for you as well. What is a year-to-date interim statement? We only have our 501c3 this year.
Well,
so they would not be.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. A 501c3 is the designation that says that you're a nonprofit. So that one you should have, and that is one that can cover multiple periods of time. The interim financial statement is, most people have a fiscal year, and that year can end a variety of different times throughout the year. So your year end may be a calendar year end, but your year end could be a 6/30 year end. And sometimes we see a 9/30 to September 30th year end. So the end of your year, we peg the financials to that. So because we ask for everyone to give us their financials at one period of time in the year, there may be no time between the end of your year and when you give us information, or there can be a substantial period of time. So that's why we look for information that'll bridge that gap between the end of your year and when you're submitting the information to us.
Thank you. A few more questions regarding budget. So there's a question, so is there no budget requirement at all? And then 2, are organizations required to submit 990s?
I'll answer the second one first, which is easy. The 990s, we require 2 years, but now that the IRS puts them online, if yours are online, we can just pull them down. But there's been a gap, and last year there was a big gap between when the year end was and when the IRS got them loaded. So if we're fortunate enough to have them online, we'll pull them down. Otherwise, we'll turn to you to provide that information. The year-to-date budget information, we ask for year-to-date financial information. That would include your income statement. So we're most interested in the actuals. If you have a budget, we ask you that you submit that as well, but we're really looking for the actuals of the current year so we can see where you are. We want to be able to tell your financial story, and that's what gives us the ability to do that.
Thank you. And another one, we are not legally required to get an audit or review. Will you accept internally prepared statements?
We will accept internally prepared statements for the period between the last financial statement that you had independently audited and right now. But we require 3 years of independently audited or reviewed financial statements. So there are 3 different ways financial statements can be prepared, and the compiled way, it sounds like, might be your way, which is we internally put it together and we put it into a format, and that is not what we're asking for. We're asking for independently prepared, which are audited or reviewed statements. That means a third party has looked at your numbers and they've given an opinion about that.
Thank you. There's a question about our focus area committees, and specifically about education. And yes, it does include education. Includes all and any type of education. Are there any other questions? We'll wait just a few minutes. And we did get one comment. I just wanted to clarify that there is no budget for our proposals this year.
The One of the things that we do is we ask if you have a budget to send it, but it's not a requirement for you to apply or to be eligible. So if we have a question, we might call you back and ask about it, but it's not an absolute requirement.
Thank you. There's another question on education, and specifically how broad do we define education? And it can be an organization that provides, it does not have to be an educational organization. If you have a project or funding area that you want to propose that's new and you're introducing a new educational component or enhancing existing, you can use that under education as well. It is really up to your discretion on how you, which groups you apply under. Sure,
Denise?
Beverly? Yes.
I would just say that this is an area that you should carefully consider when you're sending in your application, because you know your organization and you know the strengths of your organization, and you are the best person to understand how that matches up with the focus areas that we have. So I wouldn't do anything that's tangential. I would do something that's fundamental to the services that you provide.
Thank you. There's another question about budgets, and will we accept budgets under the stated areas that you talked about, Beverly?
I think Denise is the better one to handle budgets.
Okay.
That falls into an area of telling your story. So there are two ways that your story gets told in Impact. One is you tell it to us in your application, in your text, and saying why now and answering all of the questions. The second way in which your story gets told is by you sending us financial information, and we have a panel of about a dozen women who take your financial information and look at it and evaluate what story it tells about your particular organization. So the financial information becomes part of the story that the members consider when they're looking at you. So if your budget, if you have an organization that is multifaceted, but you have a separate budget for and a separate piece of your financial story that's related to a focus area committee, if you can find a way to tell that story, that would really be a plus for you to be able to distinguish that for us. So if that's what you mean, that you have this big budget, but then you have a smaller budget that is related to that particular focus area, tell us that story. So we know how to understand your organization, and we know how to then put your financial information into the right context for our members who are voting.
Thank you. Another question is, can site visits include multiple sites? May two departments at the same college or organization apply, and should we determine who will, or should we determine who will apply? Beverly?
I know, I'm trying to that's a good question. I think the real issue is, if two departments are applying, are you applying for one concept that you are going to, what's the commonality in the application that is bringing you together to apply for this grant? And the site visit really can be anything you want it to be, because it's your opportunity to give us more information. But I think the more important issue to think about is, if you have two departments, what's your common ground? Why are you sending in this? Are you writing this application because together you're trying to accomplish a common goal? And then whatever the site visit would be that would help further describe or explain this or demonstrate what this is, then it's your site visit.
Thank you. We have a lot of good questions here. Carol, the next few are for you, please. As a recipient, what advice would you give applicants as they write their LOI?
I would say have it be heartful. I think Denise, and you heard from Denise and Beverly, this is about really telling your story. So have it be heartful. In some cases with other foundations, you want to give a lot of, data and which is important here too. But make sure you tell your story. You can do that through either here or during, a site visit if it comes to that, by taking them on to a site or to a program in action, so that they can see. That's one of the things we were looking forward to last year, but we didn't have the opportunity to do that because of COVID. But it's a great opportunity to look for ways to find to tell your story and be heartful with it.
And the follow-up, thank you, Carol. The follow-up is, can you tell us a little bit about the site visit, knowing that it had to be virtual?
Well, we tried, if I recollect, to bring a couple of other people to have it be as, diversely represented as we could. Someone speaking from the actual program site, in addition to from the admin site. But it was, it was a Zoom meeting, essentially, is what we organized. And I think this was right when COVID hit. Right. I think we could think about that more creatively as an organization, because we have more facility around Zoom meetings and breakout rooms and the whole world of that. So if by any chance it turns out to be that way again next year, I think you can be a little bit more creative around things at this point than we had the opportunity to be last year, when this was in March, essentially April, when we were just getting into, oh my gosh, what happened with COVID. Still, like I said, it was a great opportunity to be able to tell our story. I love being able to talk to people about what we do and get them engaged in the whole piece of it. So, it's an opportunity to brag and to talk things up. So it's phenomenal.
Great answer. Thank you. There is a question, does the grant need to be for a specific time period? You can use the grant over 2 years, anytime within either the first or the second. And what if the grant is used for an infrastructure project? As you mentioned, audited or reviewed financial, it can be used as an infrastructure project, if that's what you would like. Is that correct, Beverly? Any additions?
Yes. The idea is that you best know how to use the funds to further your mission. And wherever you need it to make that happen, that's really what's important.
Thank you. I'm reading the question, so bear with me for a minute, please. We were awarded a grant in 2019. What would we need to do to be competitive for a grant in this coming cycle? As long as you were not awarded one of our $100,000 grants, you are applicable. You can apply this year. If you awarded a $100,000 grant, you cannot apply for 3 years. We ask for a 3-year gap between those two.
And let me just remind you that just because you were awarded a grant 2 years ago does not mean that the people sitting in the room looking and evaluating your grant this year will know anything about you. I think that that's one piece of this that sometimes applicants don't understand. And this is, these decisions are made by consensus by groups of women, and the groups of women are different in every single group in every single grant cycle. So keep that in mind. You're starting from scratch when you're applying this year. You're educating people who have no idea who you are.
Thank you. Can an organization that plans to run a capital campaign receive a grant? And I'll start. As long as the grant is not specifically going towards the capital campaign, but Beverly, if you want to expand upon that.
No, I mean that's it. That's what one of the things that you are not allowed to use the grant for.
another good question. Does the Impact 100 Philly funds have to be the sole source of funds for the program or a portion of existing program that currently has funding? We would use Impact 100 Philly funds to expand that effort. Again, I think it goes back to the story and the value of what the Impact 100 money is going to be used for. And if you can tell why there's value to it, independent of whether it's, it doesn't have to be for a single project. But if anyone would like to expand upon that.
Sure, I'd like to say that I think that's a shift from previous years. We're not asking you to talk about a specific program that you're applying for money for. Rather, if you have a program that's in existence and you want to expand it or replicate it, that's part of the why now story of how the money you would leverage it to move you to a whole new level of providing services. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Organizations with budgets under 50,000 are not required to have 990s. Are they eligible?
If you do not have 990s, you would not be eligible.
And thank you. Does infrastructure mean a one-time capital cost, like building a new classroom?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If someone wanted to, go ahead.
No, I was just going, I think what they're trying to clarify is if we're going to support infrastructure, or what does that mean?
I believe it can include building and facilities.
I think we funded that recently, actually. I know it went forward in full proposals recently. I think we funded that recently, where they were making structural changes. So I mean, I think that what's important to keep in mind is we're trying to support your mission, and we're not going to support a capital campaign because that's a pretty grand idea. We're trying to support something that's very specific, that's going to have an impact in your neighborhood. A capital campaign's not really going to, you can't be very specific about that. But, if you describe something that is going to bump you to the next stage of your mission and really make a significant change in your neighborhood, that's really what we're looking for. We're trying to put money in places that will change your neighborhood.
Thank you. Our organization had a site visit last year, but was not selected as a finalist. Is it possible to receive feedback on the site visit? It's very difficult for us to provide specific feedback about site visits. One, it's because, as both Beverly and Denise have spoken about, we have different people each year. So if we were to give advice one year, that could be very different for the next year to the group of women who will be meeting with you. So and if we give information to one group, is that fair to all of the others? So what we try to do is be fair and equitable, and there are certain categories that we look very strongly for, and we do try to provide information regarding those. Alice, anything else? Or Beverly?
I was just going to say, the other thing to keep in mind is that I know that so much time and effort goes into these applications, and I know that you want this very specific feedback, but the reality is every year that whoever you're sitting next to competing with is different. And it may be as simple as there were just some more compelling organizations this year. And it's not because you were lacking in anything. It's just, this other organization applied for a grant and they're just doing this phenomenal job in whatever they're doing. And I know, I know you're looking for a script and you're looking for an equation, and this organization actually doesn't work that way. The decisions are based on conversations that people in the room have about what they see in your application and what they see on your website and what they see on the site visit. And so it's so many factors. And then what's going on in the world and what's going on in your neighborhood. And so it's a very complex, fluid conversation. And it's really impossible unless you completely don't meet a requirement, which you frankly know, because we give you a list of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So, I hope that helps. Alice, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you said it. You said it very well.
Thank you. Can you clarify if a statewide nonprofit agency with 67% of clients in the region is eligible?
No. Well, the question becomes whether you have to have a local presence. If you have a local presence and a local bank account, and you can separate out what you are doing locally, then that can be considered. And Denise, I think you probably can comment more specifically on the financial evidence of that.
I can. We have had applicants who serve a broader areas than the 5-county area in southeastern Pennsylvania. So if you have that local presence, you're serving the people in the 5-county area, and you have a bank account in the organization's name, the local organization's name, then what we'll look at is the story of how you're serving the people in the 5-county region. So if you're spread across the state and the bulk of what you're doing is outside the 5-county region, but you touch the 5-county region, your chances are not very good, because we're really looking for you being focused on the 5-county region of southeastern Pennsylvania.
Thank you. There's a question about the application process, and do we need to have a slide room account? That is when you click on our link to apply for the LOI. If you do not have a slide room account, there's a place where you can sign up for one right there. So it's automated. Does the grant money need to be spent within 1 year? What is the time period? It can be spent in 1 year, or it can be over 2. It's really at your preference. Excuse me for 1 second. I don't see any more questions. Does anyone have more? Oh, here's one. Is there a limit on the number of times an organization can apply? There is not.
We had somebody apply, I think 8 times before they received a grant. So, some people are very tenacious about it.
Beyond the 4 grants of $100,000, how many grants of smaller amounts are typically awarded in a given year? We typically do 8. It would be the 3 $100,000, 2 smaller grants of the monies that's left over. And then as of last year, we started a new program called Community Awards. That's not something that's applied for, but we give 3 grants of smaller amounts to deserving organizations in the region. Does anyone want to expand on that?
I think that the other piece of information about community awards is simply that they're a small committees determine the issue areas that they're going to be looking at in funding organizations that address those issue areas. Those issue areas have not yet been determined. And really the fact of the matter is that since organizations really have no ability to influence that because you don't apply, it's strictly something that's done by these committees on their own to organizations that appear to be doing good work in the issue areas.
Thank you. Do you accept photos or video links in the LOI or proposal? I believe we accept both of those, do we not?
We've gotten them.
Yes. And is there a specific format for the letter of inquiry for both the letter of inquiry and the full proposal? Those are questions that you can answer, so we pre-format things for you. You don't have to do the formatting. And there's a couple questions about how old an organization has to be to apply. And we need 3 years of financials. Is that the best answer there, Denise?
That is the best answer, because generally at the close of your fiscal year, it takes your accountant a couple months to put together. It takes you a little bit of time to gather the information to give to the third party, and then they have to evaluate it and get it back to you. So in effect, if you need 3 years worth of these financial statements, you have to have had 3 full years and then some in operation in order to have that kind of paper trail of your financial situation.
There's a question about how do we get on the list for the community awards, which we knew would be a question.
Right.
Go ahead, Beverly. That's
the whole point, is that you don't get on the list. It's not something you have any control over. I mean, and we don't even know what the issue areas are going to be in the coming grant cycle. It's really, this is just something that the organization has decided that they want to try and focus on specific issues in the region and see if they can help bolster organizations addressing those issues. And they, whatever the issues are today may not even be the same issues when they really get underway in a couple months. So this is not anything that you can influence, and that's really by design.
And honestly, the organizations that we look at for community awards, typically there's no overlap with those who apply, because they're typically much smaller organizations with much lower budgets.
Right. Last year we gave out a we gave out a $10,000 award and 2 $5,000 awards. So that's far removed from what these grants are that require applications. I'm sorry, Denise.
No, thank you. And Beverly, is there a space for a written addendum to our current year actuals? So that might be Denise, actually.
Yeah, that's Denise.
Space for an addendum to our current year actuals. So the current year actuals, you can put additional information to accompany that, which is part of telling your story. So if there is something important that you would want to explain in relation to your current year financials, then by all means, you should add that to the current year financial information, because it helps tell the story. One of the things we get from the audited financial statements are the comments. The comments that the independent parties put on tell us your story through their eyes. So when you compile your interim financial statements that you're putting together, and they're not coming from that independent party, if there's an important part of your story, you want to be able to tell that. And let me explain what that means. At the point at which you're giving us the information, you might be at a point in your financial cycle where your current year financials don't look as good as you know they're going to look, because you expect other funding to come in later. So that's why some people choose to give us their budget along with their current year financials, because it tells their story better. And if that's the case, then by all means, tell your story better. I hope that answers the question, but yes, there is some room there for you to be able to tell your story in your current year financials from your perspective to help us understand the way your revenues come in and the way they go out. And you may want to have footnotes or additional notes that go with it.
Thank you. There's a question: if the organization serves children and young adults with developmental disabilities, how does this affect the preference for being led by a staff and board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve? And that's a very good question. I would assume, well, we are not specific. We prefer organizations that reflect the diversity. So is there someone who's a graduate of the program who is on the board? Are there other people on the board with developmental disabilities? So just like any diversity measure, we would be looking for how that is applicable. Anyone else to add to that?
I think the point of the request is that if people on your staff and board reflect the diversity of the population served, they have common ground. They I mean, there's no way that they don't connect at some level to the issues facing the population you're serving. And so, I mean, everybody on the board doesn't have to be that person, but there has to be a way for that thought process to be involved in the decision making, so that you don't have people who impose their philosophy onto a different demographic. That's really it. You don't want other people telling people what to do when they don't have any common reference point.
That's a great answer, Beverly, and I think reflects a lot of the discussions that we have in our meetings when there is a question around this. What if the designated contact or email changes during the application process? The application is open. You can go back and edit your application. So until you submit, you can continue to go back to the application. If you've submitted, you can email us at, we'll have an email at the end, the nonprofit liaison link, and we can update that for you. I recall you saying earlier that proposals can focus on programs or services. Does that include general operating support for multiple programs, or should it be specific to one program or service provided? Alice?
I would say that, again, it's the why now question. You know, they are core mission grants, which is how we refer to them rather than operating grants, even though technically it may appear to be the same. The point is that to just say, you want to convince us that this infusion of funds will somehow uplift your programs or provide some move your organization along its developmental process. You know, you have to explain why the money across all programs would be so important at this time. So again, it's more than just, you know, we need help with our funding. It's why now? You know, why would this money make a big difference for us?
Great. Thank you, Alice. I think we are at the end of the questions, unless there are any last minute ones. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for your interest in Impact 100 grants. As a recap, the letter of interest application will be open later today and will stay open until midnight December 8th. You can apply online at our website, Impact100Philly.org. It's under the Grant Applicant section. And the system we use, which was discussed a little earlier, Slide Room, allows you to work in draft mode so that you can work on the application at your convenience. Please direct any questions to the email address on the screen, nonprofitliaison@Impact100Philly.org. All of this information is also on our website. And to reiterate, During the application process, the nonprofit liaison team will be working with you and answering questions. And once we get into the actual grant process itself, then the grant team, which is another Alice and Beverly, will be helping support that effort. Thank you all for attending today. We appreciate your interest in Impact 100 and are always humbled by the powerful work your organizations do in the Philadelphia region. Thank also our presenters today, Alice, Denise, Beverly, and Carol. It is clear by the thoroughness of today's program that a lot of work has gone into this session. Thank you very much. And if any of your questions were not answered, please send them to the nonprofit liaison address listed. Good luck with your applications.